Hi, welcome. Today we will be looking at chapter 3, lesson number 1, the cell theory. In this chapter, we will basically be looking at cell structure and function. We will be looking at the cell structure and function, and in the first lesson, that is lesson number 1, we will look at the cell theory. In the cell theory, we have the key concept here being that cells are made, cells are the basic unit of life. Then the main ideas that we will come across will include early studies led to the development of the cell theory. We will also look at prokaryotic cells, lack a nucleus, and most internal structures of the eukaryotic cell. Now we will go directly to the first part of this lesson. But before we look at this lesson, first of all, we should think about a cell and ask ourselves, what is this cell? So when we say the cell are the basic unit of life, then it means that our bodies, that is me together and you, are all made of cells. So the building blocks of our bodies are just but cells. And we have millions of cells that are specific or have specific functions. Before the 1600s, nobody knew about a cell. And even the idea of a cell was not known by then. People had many other ideas about the basis of life. But with the discovery of the microscope, this was in fact a breakthrough. This was a breakthrough because after discovering the microscope, scientists now were able to observe tiny things that they could not see with their naked eyes. What we will be early studies led to the development of the cell theory. So when we look at the cell theory, we first of all need to know who are the people who started or came up with this breakthrough. Almost all cells are too small to see without the aid of a microscope. Almost all cells are too small. The early scientists had a challenge of discovering these cells, and they had to go through a lot. The first or the most important thing was to come up with lenses. So these powerful lenses, as the power of the lens increased, the invention of the compound microscope in 1500s was also very important. So the invention of the compound microscope compound microscope. In the late 1500, was very important, in the late 1500s was very important. This was discovered by a Dutch scientist, that is a Dutch glass maker, Zachariah Jansen. It is believed probably he was assisted by his father, Hans. His father, Hans. So we can say that this man, Zachariah, of course, was very important by inventing the compound microscope. By inventing the compound microscope, he had brought about a breakthrough to seeing or magnifying objects even higher. So a compound microscope contains two or more lenses. A compound microscope contains two or more lenses. So because of it having more lenses, the total magnification of the product was high. So generally, much more powerful with this compound microscope, the scientists now had a way of observing objects. The discovery of cells. So when we look at the discovery of cells, it was first done by Sir Robert Hooke. So in 1665, an English scientist, Robert Hooke, English scientist Robert Hooke, used a three-lens compound microscope, a three-lens compound microscope. In fact, the microscope he used is just in here. This is the compound microscope that Robert Hooke used to examine thin slice of cork. So he examined thin slice of cork. Thin slice of cork. What he observed, in fact, was amazing. When he was observing this cork, he saw many compartments. So the compartments that he saw, these tiny compartments, the tiny compartments that Robert Hooke saw, reminded him of the compartments in the monastery. Compartments in the monastery. Which of course were called cells. So because they were called cells, Robert Hooke also called these small tiny cells, objects that he was seeing, cells. So he also called them cells. So cells, basically the name cells, came from compartments or small rooms. So these compartments are small rooms. That is what basically it means. What he observed were not living cells, but dead. So he was observing dead cork cells. Dead cells. He observed dead cork cells. The cork cells that he observed, of course, at that time nobody had observed anything of this type, and Robert Hooke was, of course, a hero, and he brought about a breakthrough. At around the same period of time, so if we look here, this is what he was looking at, this is what he saw. As you can see them, they are just small compartments or small rooms, and you can see there are very many. So around the same time, Anton van Leeuwenhoek, Anton van Leeuwenhoek, sorry, Anton van Leeuwenhoek. So this is a Dutch scientist. This Dutch scientist or Dutch tradesman came up with, at his own spare time, what normally Anton van Leeuwenhoek used to do is to observe or to look at small things. It had become a hobby for him, and by at this point in time, in 1674, Leeuwenhoek became one of the first people to describe living cells. In 1665, Leeuwenhoek became one of the first he became one of the first people to describe living cells. So what he used to do was simple. Leeuwenhoek used to collect water from gutters. He used to collect water from ponds and then observe. To his amusement, he used to see small organisms swirling about, moving up and down. And as he saw these ones, he called them animalcules. He called them animalcules to mean small animals. Of course, it was an amusement to him. It was an amusement to him because nobody else had seen these things. So when he observed numerous cell organisms swimming in a pond of water, he sketched them. He started making sketches. So he drew some of the organisms that he was seeing through sketches. So he sketched his animalcules. Animalcules. So you can see how amazed he was, to an extent that he started sketching them. So as people continue to improve the microscope over the next century and a half, it became steadier. easier to use and capable of greater magnification. So the combination of factors led people to examine even more organisms. They observed wide variety of cell shapes and observed cells dividing. Scientists began to ask important questions like, is all matter made of cells? Is all matter made of cells? Is all matter made of cells? So with these great discoveries, people also now started developing new interests in this field. Or maybe they started asking themselves, where do cells come from? Where do cells come from? So these questions being posed by people made scientists to be more curious. That means this brought a challenge to scientists, and as scientists they started carrying out researches. Then this is when something very important now came in, and that is what we are calling the cell theory. So the cell theory was a result of first observation of tiny organisms by Sir Robert Hooke, which of course was not just done by him, but Zachariah also contributed a great deal by discovering compound microscope, and down to Anton van Leeuwenhoek, who, as we have seen, discovered even very unique things, and that is small organisms. And these, of course, developed into curiosity, and scientists started developing interest in discovering cells. The German scientist Matthias Schleiden was the next in the row. He also used a compound microscope to study plant tissue. In 1838, he proposed that plants are made of cells. In 1838, he proposed that plant cells are made that plants are made of cells, that plants are made of cells. So this was he was now coining the first part of what we now regard as the cell theory. Schleiden discussed with fellow scientists about this. He discussed his results with fellow scientists, and Theodor Schwann, another German scientist, Theodor Schwann, who was struck by the similarity, was struck by the similarity between plant and animal cells To him, this was something very unique, and not only him, even up to now, it is something that still amazes people. How come plants and animal cells are the same, or they almost look the same, or have the same parts? So Theodor Schwann, after his striking, Schwann concluded that all animals are made of cells. He concluded that all animals are made of cells. He concluded that all animals are made of cells. So, shortly after 1839, he published the first statement of the cell theory. Shortly thereafter, in 1839, he published the first statement of the cell theory. So after coming up together with his countryman Matthias Schleiden and discovering that plants and animals are made of cells, he was the first to publish the first statement of the cell theory, concluding that all living things are made of cells and cell products, concluding that all living things are made of cells and cell products. This theory helped lay the ground for all biological research that followed. However, it had to be refined over the years as additional data led to new conclusions. For example, Schwann stated in his publication that cells form spontaneously. Cells form spontaneously. In his publication, cells form spontaneously. By spontaneously, he was meaning that cells really form from nowhere. They just happen to be, which was not right. So as people continued with research, they proved him wrong. So later it was discovered by another scientist, that is in 1855. In 1855, Rudolf Foucault discovered that cells really come from other cells. Discovered that cells come from existing cells. He discovered that cells come from from existing cells, and this of course crushed the first theory or the first belief by Matthias in his publication, where he was claiming that cells form spontaneously. So he crushed this theory as he came up with the real evidence. So we will stop there for now.